Real excited today to welcome Emily Brewer to the podcast. It is such an odd time these days. Hopefully everybody is paying attention and obeying the rules, and you're sheltered in place despite what your local governments may be telling you. Stay home. Most of us are not essential. But what is an interesting time is we get to sit down with a lot of people, and I don't know how many of you have been on Zoom. If you've heard of it, it's kind of a big thing right now. But Emily and I are joined over Zoom, and I'm welcome Emily, who's the executive director of Presbyterian Peace Fellowship. But I'm going to, as we do here on the podcast, go ahead and let Emily just introduce yourself. Who is Emily? Tell us what we need to know, including one interesting thing about you that maybe people don't know.
Cool. Well, like you said, my name's Emily Brewer. I use she and her pronouns. I am the executive director of the Presbyterian Peace Fellowship, and I've been in that role since 2015, more or less. And I started that role actually right out of seminary. So I graduated seminary from Union in New York and just immediately stepped into, it was then a co-director role, but I'm not sure what they were thinking, but that's part of who I am right now, or at least kind of how I channel some of who I am into the world. And I also am a daughter and a sister and a partner, and I love my family a whole lot. And if anybody knows me, this will not be surprising, but I'm an Enneagram 1 is like maybe my interest, my fact about myself.
There you go. And then we just lost half our readers like, oh, you and your listeners. Enneagram.
We don't have to talk about it.
I'm a 3 and I love it. So
yeah.
So I have to fight my 3 during this shelter in place time because the productivity kind of pressures. And I think I've done really well with it. I'm just like, that's just not getting done, and I can be okay with that. But and then where are you located now, and where did you grow up?
Sure. So I live in Brooklyn, New York. I moved to New York City in 2012 to start seminary. I thought I would only be here for 3 years. I'm not a city person. I'm not a Northeast person, but I'm still here. And my partner's here and loves it. So I guess we're here for a while. We make sacrifices, right? But I'm from a kind of small town in East Tennessee, just right near the Smoky Mountains. And also spent time in Nashville and in Guatemala. So I feel like there are pieces of my heart that are in lots of different homes, but East Tennessee and New York are my main ones.
Great. Awesome. And just for folks who, I do have a lot of religious folks on here. So Emily is part of the same denomination that I'm part of, the Presbyterian Church USA. And we've got to get into trouble on occasion. We were arrested together at the border, and that seemed like forever ago.
Yeah.
Was it just a year ago, right? Year and a half, maybe?
December 2018.
2018,
mm-hmm.
Yeah. It feels like a lifetime ago.
And
Emily is one of our denominations, just I think generally good people, but also doing a lot of great work around peace and justice. Also partnered with our fossil free initiatives, just a lot of good stuff, and is fluent in Spanish as well. So, and one thing that we do have in common is that we both believe that if you were to die in your apartment and you have a cat or a dog, the cat would eat you first, right?
Yeah, it's true. I am looking at my cat now, and I am sure she would not hesitate.
My dog could be like, "What's the matter? What are you lie down beside me?" And yeah, we don't have cats, so because I do. I think cats are like, "Oh, eyeballs. Those look soft and yummy. I'm going for it." But
yeah, definitely. Yeah,
we do have.
I hold no illusions about her love for us and how far it extends.
I know we have had friends. They're like, "No, my cat would never eat me." I'm like, okay.
That's what my partner thinks. I mean, she's really his cat. He thinks that she would take care of him or something, and I'm like,
okay. We all can believe what we want to believe.
That's right.
So how are you all handling you're in New York, so I mean, we're both on these coasts that have been hit really hard, and you all are experiencing much more worse than we are right now. Our peak will be in the next week or two. But how have you been personally handling the quarantine time and the shut-in, the shelter-in-place time?
Yeah, we've been really lucky that we have both been able to shelter in place pretty effectively. Um, my my work is mostly from home. I travel a lot for work, but when I'm not traveling, my office is in my house. So that part has not changed very much for me. And my partner is also able to now work from home. He's a lawyer and all the courts are closed. So
Oh, right.
yeah. And we also were able to stock up on the groceries we needed and, have figured out grocery delivery stuff.
Right.
So we feel really lucky in that sense. And we're both healthy and well in that sense. And I think I've just felt really grateful for each other in this time. And, we're a little bored sometimes, but like, that's not a big deal.
Yeah.
I think that thing I've been realizing over the last couple of days is how really sad I'm feeling, but not about anything in particular. Like I have not lost anyone close to me, but I think I just feel really sad about I know that there's like all this grief around me, even though since we're not going outside very much, it's like we're kind of unaware in some ways of like what the vibe is out there. But it's just kind of around. And I think I also feel some anticipatory sadness for the folks that we will lose. So I've been kind of trying to figure out how to care for that. And my orientation or my initial response to that kind of sadness sometimes is numbness. So I'm trying to not give into that, but it's hard.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that's the same. I mean, for those of us that are taking this seriously and are kind of staying in our homes, the only outside interaction we get is whatever we're seeing on TV or listening to on our radio or podcasts. And yeah, and I think those of us that are also pastoring churches, like our first inclination is to go to people and when they're struggling. And fortunately, our church does not have anybody that has been tested positive. We had a few folks that they're pretty sure they were positive, but are on the mend, which is great. But yeah, I think there's this thing going on that, like you and us, we have this privilege to be able to just be outside of it. I mean, all the folks who are struggling with unemployment and sickness and healthcare workers and grocery store clerks and all those folks, like people are like, churches should be able to meet. And I'm like, yeah, actually not. I think we're going to be okay. This is not essential. So you all I try to get a walk every day. I try to do 3 or 4 miles every day just to clear my head and get some exercise. So how are you handling? Are you able to get out a little bit?
We try to time it. We live about 3 blocks from Prospect Park, which is an amazing thing and one of our favorite parts about where we live. But the park is so crowded. Apparently, the governor, Andrew Cuomo,
was that the park that he went to?
Yeah, yes. He was like, this is not good. But it's both really good. And once I get back from the walk, I feel much better, but also it's really stressful people who are running will come really close. So I was telling you earlier that I keep wanting to like get these pool noodles and like somehow duct tape them to my sides to like force people to stay away from me.
It's only a matter of time until somebody develops a hula hoop holder that is, 6 feet on each side.
That's right. Or like a squirt gun or something, non-violently reminding people.
12-foot ring space that is like, stay away from me.
That's right. Yes.
Well, if you were to go out today, is it still crowded in the park?
Yeah, it's pretty crowded. I mean, people are, especially right at 5, it gets really crowded as people are finishing, even folks who are just finishing their normal work day, but they still have to keep 9 to 5 hours. So we figured out times when it's better. Sometimes we go on a walk after lunch. And we're actually super lucky that we have some outdoor space in our home. We live in the bottom floor of a townhouse. So there's a little it's not really, I wouldn't call it a yard. It's mostly concrete, but that's like way more than most New Yorkers have. So we feel lucky for that.
Yeah. We're very fortunate too. We were living in San Francisco for 30 years in a 2-bedroom apartment, 1 bathroom. And now we moved into this new place with a new church. And it's the largest home we've ever lived in with the fewest number of people in our house because everybody was gone. But now that 2 of our 3 children are back during all of this, we're so grateful. And again, just kind of feel like, okay, so our response of this has to be how do we not contribute to all the other pain that's going on? And
Yeah.
like things like we have a dog walker, and we were talking with her, and we committed we're going to keep paying you no matter what. I mean, as long as we can. But like all of her clients who live in a very wealthy area where we live in Palo Alto just bailed on her. Like they just stopped, and like I'm like, you all can afford to keep paying somebody if this isn't happening. I mean, are you seeing both sides of that in where you're living? Are folks stepping out to kind of support each other still, or are there folks just kind of on their own? And what are you seeing just in terms of how the community is responding to each other?
Yeah, I think some both and I don't know if you've been listening to this new podcast called the Staying In podcast with
No, but
Kumail Nanjiani and his spouse Emily, whose name I'm blanking on.
no.
Do you know them?
And I do. Yeah. That's awesome. Okay.
Yeah. So comedian, they're hysterical. If you've seen The Big Sick, it's those folks. But he was just talking about.
He's cut now. Have you seen him?
Well, I haven't, but she talks about it in the podcast.
Oh my God. Like it almost looks photoshopped.
That's so funny. When he was on a front of a Men's Health or something, and I only know about it because they talk about it on the podcast.
Now you're gonna Google it, and everybody's like, "Why are you good?" Like it's gonna pop up.
That's right. But yeah, so he was talking about how it's like bringing out the best and the worst, which I think makes a lot of sense for crises. But like there's our kind of block association. There's like 3 blocks on our street that I guess are block association. But we got a little sheet through our mail slot that was this thing, and it had this whole list of numbers of folks who are willing to check in on people, do distance grocery drops, things like that. And everybody puts up they gave out a red, a yellow, and a green sheet of paper. And so you put up green if you're doing good, you put up yellow if you could use somebody to check in on you, and red if you really need something. And so that was really sweet and cool. And
you noticed are people using it?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we've seen it in some of the houses, the windows as we've passed by. So that feels good, and like kind of good community care. We've done things like, we really feel like we need to stay in. That's like part of our contribution to not spreading. And also we both have health things that make us a little bit higher risk. Mm-hmm. So one of the things that we've tried to commit to is we're still paying our Y membership because the Y is an essential service, doing childcare for healthcare providers, stuff like that. So some of those things that we're not necessarily immediately benefiting from, but feel like, okay, we both still have salaries. This is what we should do.
It rankles me to no end that when folks are like, this is not the time to hoard your wealth. I mean, just good God. It just makes me so angry, especially when you have churches that are struggling and pastors aren't going to be able to get paid, and then churches that are well off and trying to figure out how to make sure we can remain well off. And just, anyway, so let's talk about what you do. So tell us a little bit about Presbyterian Peace Fellowship, and just assume that most folks listening to this don't know anything about the organization. And then is there anything, what exciting things, what meaningful things are happening right now in your work?
Cool. So I think it's helpful. I won't do the whole history thing, but I think it is really helpful to know where we come from. And that includes our generational stories or our organizational stories. So the Presbyterian Peace Fellowship was formed by the Fellowship of Reconciliation. The Fellowship of Reconciliation began during World War II as an interfaith during World War I as an interfaith nonviolent response to war and militarism. And then during World War II, they spun off all of these individual peace fellowships. So there's like a Lutheran Peace Fellowship and an Episcopal and a Presbyterian and a Baptist. And those peace fellowships were created to help folks in those particular denominations who were conscientious objectors to war. And these peace fellowships both helped people go through the process, because it's a very bureaucratic, paper-filled process to become a conscientious objector, especially when there's a draft in place like there was in World War II. And secondly, but not secondarily, to help those folks find community and support one another, because it was a really unpopular stance, even in many churches. So many folks were kind of isolated from their families and churches and needed support. So those are our roots. We're very rooted in the anti-war, anti-militarism movements, peace movements. And we don't do direct work with conscientious objectors now, although there's a great organization called the Center on Conscience and War that does do that now. But we have remained committed to trying to undo militarism in the many ways that it manifests, like through colonialism and other things like that, through nonviolence. And we talk about, I think it's important, you can't see it when I'm talking, but we spell nonviolence with no hyphen. So it's one word. So it's not just not violence. It is.
Oh, I don't think I ever realized that. I learned something today. Thank you.
So it's like a whole kind of like, it's not just not violence. It's a new thing that is creative and active and not just passivity. I think some people think that pacifism means that we're passive or,
right.
Something like that. But so we don't even use the words pacifism very much anymore. Some folks are still really comfortable with that language, but mostly we talk about nonviolence with no hyphen.
Oh, awesome. Okay. So what does that look like these days? I mean, what are the main programs, things you all are doing that folks need to know about?
Yeah. So I think we're pretty small organization in terms of budget and staff, but we have a lot of members. And so what that means is it allows us to be pretty flexible and responsive to what needs come up, which is really exciting. And also means that sometimes we have lots of different projects going on. So some of those projects right now, I think you talked to my colleague, Allison Wood, a few episodes ago, who is our accompaniment coordinator. So we've been doing accompaniment, which is like human rights kind of solidarity work along the border and in Colombia, South America. We work with churches on gun violence prevention and trying to help empower and equip churches to be a public voice of faith for gun violence prevention, kind of in the public. So we think about it kind of outside the four walls of the church. How can churches be engaged in the work to prevent gun violence in our communities? We also have been involved in the last few years with the movement to divest from fossil fuels in the PCUSA, which is part of a much larger movement, global movement to divest from fossil fuels. And really, that's been newer work for us, but because of this commitment to anti-militarism, we know that climate change is going to be is already a predictor of armed conflict and makes armed conflicts more frequent and worse for people. And so we feel like if we're serious about preventing war, we have to be part of the climate justice movement. Right. And then the last thing I'll mention is just that we have been working within the PCUSA to help create a network of peace churches. So these are churches, congregations within the Presbyterian Church that hold a really strong commitment to anti-war and anti-militarism. So that's not like a national policy of the church, but we know that there are individual congregations who really want to hold on to that, like your church.
That's right.
So that's a new thing that we're kind of still figuring out what that looks like, but we're trying to help connect and equip churches who want to take that extra step and call themselves and be peace churches.
Right. That's awesome. Well, and you all, there's one other thing that you all have done in the last year, I guess, around ordaining somebody to fight gun violence. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. So, so Deanna Hollis is, I think, our newest staff member. And she is ordained as the Gun Violence Prevention Ministries Coordinator of the Presbyterian Peace Fellowship. And she was ordained to that work out of a presbytery in Texas, which we don't necessarily always think of as the most progressive place, but that presbytery really cares about this work. And they were really wonderful. And they said, and PPF believes that this is work of the gospel, like to help prevent gun violence, is work that the church should be involved in. And So a lot of her work is supporting Presbyterians and pastors as they do this work that can be really hard. They can get a lot of pushback for. So it's a lot of pastoral accompaniment and also other resources.
Is there any, I mean, our denomination, for those of you who know, has gone through a huge transition in the last few years just around what we do around social justice and things and the way we talk about it. But I mean, this is a big deal. Are there other denominations at all that have somebody that is ordained around gun violence?
Not that we know of.
Yeah.
And that was really why I think Deanna got a lot of national attention. We were we were pleasantly surprised, but kind of surprised. The New York Times ran a piece on her. The different NPR stations have interviewed her several times, which is really cool. And I think what it says to us is that people are hungry for a faith voice talking about this.
And one that combats kind of the narrative that is out there. Yeah, that religious people are, I mean, not our round of folks, but religious people in general are going to be pro-gun. And I mean, I thought it was amazing.
Yeah. It's like that kind of public theology that's so important. And that I think our church is really stepping into in unique and creative ways.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you. So folks, in the show notes, there'll be a link where you can donate. I have no problem asking people to give money to organizations that are good. So pony up. There'll be a link. Give some money to Presbyterian Peace Fellowship. It's one of the organizations that I support, our family supports, that I'm shocked at how small the budget is and the amount of work that you do. So it is amazing. Can I ask you kind of how has COVID-19 impacted your work? Has that shifted anything? You talked about being agile. I mean, what has that impacted Presbyterian Peace Fellowship at all, or how?
Well, I think the most immediate thing for us, definitely, it has impacted us. The most immediate thing was that we had accompaniers in both Colombia and in Mexico along the border that needed to come home early. And we're not sending accompaniers right now because the point of sending accompaniers is to increase the safety of our partners. And we would not be doing that right now if we sent accompaniers. So we're still trying to figure out, and I think our partners are trying to figure out what they need from us in this moment. But trying to figure out how we can help be accompaniers from a distance when it's totally based on physical presence. And so we've had to cancel some events and things like that, but that's the most immediate one. But in many ways, we were pretty poised to ride out this wave for a little while because we're a national organization. So our folks are very familiar with Zoom and we do lots online anyways. And then I think the last thing I would say just about that is that I've really been encouraging us to just take some time to breathe and not to try and, I think that there's a real strong impulse. I find it in myself to like produce and act and like do all these things. And we just need some time and space to breathe for a minute.
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, the overfunctioning that is going on in the world, as if it's almost like guilt if we should be doing something. We should be producing content. We should be productive. I mean, I had joked on some of my networks around, I'm not reading all the books basically that I say that I'm going to read on vacation. I'm doing the same thing now. I'm like, oh, I'm going to do all this stuff. And I'm like, I'm not reading this stuff. It's just the pile is still there. And I'm not. So finding some balance. I mean, we're about a month into this for us. So we're really settled into some patterns. You all have now must be settling into some patterns as well, which is good. All right. Thank you. Let's take a quick break and we'll be right back. And we're back, still here with Emily Brewer. Thanks for being here. So we're going to shift a little bit. And as we do with all these, we talk a little bit about some things that are not related to our work and just trying to realize that we're all kind of complex human beings. And so I had asked Emily earlier, I was like, what are some things you're passionate about, excited about that that really don't have to do with your work? And there was a blank earlier before. Did we discover something in the last half hour?
I don't think I've really discovered anything. I'm just going to spin it differently. Yeah. I was saying like, this time has made me realize I don't really have hobbies.
Yeah.
But I did say that one of my hobbies is eating. I love
Okay, there you go.
food. I love good food. And so we've been cooking a lot, and we
Yeah.
use the New York Times cooking app a ton. Um, and Smitten Kitchen and some of those other favorite cooking blogs. And it's just kind of fun to try and get creative. And
Yeah.
we
So
have more time and space in our lives
and you're
to do
cooking
that.
more together now, I would assume.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, we cook a lot from home anyways, but I think it has helped to try and think about fun things that we want to eat when we're kind of grieving getting to go. I mean, it's one of our favorite parts about living in New York is all of the amazing food and our friends that we get to go eat it with. So
yeah. Well, I know our house, we basically are eating our feelings, and we just had in the last couple of weeks, like, we can't keep doing this. Like, because we weren't eating well. We weren't feeding our feelings well. Yeah, peanut M&Ms, potato chips, sitting in front of the TV. So now we've kind of shifted and we're like, okay, that was a needed phase. And now we're gonna, but the hard part in our family is that not everybody appreciates good food. So I like to cook good food, and presentation is really important to me, as my children will give me a hard time. My Instagram story is half food,
yeah,
half
I
my
follow you on
dog.
Instagram. I see that.
It's a lot of food, right? So
it's great.
but my family are like, food for fuel. So
Well, and I would just say, like, if you're in a peanut M&Ms and potato chips kind of place and it's not making you feel worse, do it. Like,
but it
I think
to make me feel
yeah,
awful.
I mean, of course, it's the same as like watching TV. If the watching TV is making you feel good, do it until it doesn't.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that there's some coping things that are fine and good, and they help us cope for a reason.
Yep, exactly. No, it was kind of like, because we were in week 2 and we're all like, we're out of chips, and you can kind of see us like wandering around the house. There's other food in the fridge, people. Chips. Anyway, yeah. So, well, let me ask you. As long as we're kind of in this phase, I ask everybody on the show, what are you reading? What do you watch? What are you reading? What are you watching? What are you listening to? So, let's start. What are you reading these days?
I am like you. I've been having a hard time doing nearly as much reading as I thought I would. But one thing I'm reading is Undoing Border Imperialism by Harsha Walia. And actually PPF, Presbyterian Peace Fellowship, is doing a weekly book club on that, which we try to keep pretty low key. Like, even if you haven't totally read it, show up, connect, learn something. So that's incredible. And I think one of the things that's so good about that book, along with several other people's writing, is this idea that we have to begin to create the world that we have to live now and practice the practices that create the kind of world that we want to live in.
Right.
So some of that care, like we were talking about, people who are caring for each other in this moment, is kind of part of that. And then I'm also,
okay, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
Do you have brain candy reading?
Yeah, the other thing I'm reading right now is that my birthday was a couple weeks ago, and my partner got me the box set of Harry Potter. So I'm starting back over at the beginning of Harry Potter, which I haven't read for years, and I'm just loving.
I mean, it would imagine, kind of as you're reading, it brings you back to the time that you were reading it the first time, and like what was going on in your world the first time. Anyway, so what are you listening to?
Well, like I said, I'm listening to the Staying In podcast with Camille Nanjiani and Emily. Let me look up her name while we're talking, so I'm not doing that thing where I'm just remembering the spouse by the male partner's name. Not who I want to be.
Exactly. Say him and his wife.
That's right. Yes. I know. I got married about 8 months ago, and like, we still don't call each other husband and wife. I just like can't do it. And which is fine, it works for us. But it meant that one time I was trying to explain to somebody, like in an official capacity. I use it if I'm like trying to get my way or something, in a bureaucracy. But I accidentally, my spouse is a man. He would be my husband, I guess. But I don't use that word. And so I called him my wife accidentally. And I think the person was like, oh, okay. And I was like, and it was just
good thing you live where you live.
Yeah. I mean, it was great, but I think they were trying to prove that they were like really down and cool. And then I didn't want to be like, oh, no, I didn't mean that. I was just like a general Emily awkward in the world kind of moment.
That's the name of your podcast.
Emily awkward in the world.
Right. Yeah, that should be.
Okay, well, I can't find her last name, but Emily and Kumail.
Yeah, there we go.
It's great. I think that's been my main podcast that I've been listening to. And I actually have been listening to a lot of hymns on piano in the background. There's something that's been, I don't normally, but it's just been really comforting to me to hear those familiar tunes. I think, you know, my grandmother is somebody who would hum hymns in the kitchen and stuff like that. So there's something comforting about that to me in this time.
Well, you're the first person in about 4 podcasts that has not mentioned My Dad Wrote a Porno, which
it's on my list. I haven't started it yet.
Oh, I don't. It is incredibly explicit because it's reading erotic literature, as they would say. It is so funny. Oh my!
Yeah, I've heard.
I would almost. I listened to it while I was driving, and that's actually dangerous because I was laughing so hard that laughing so hard where you kind of lose control of your.
Yeah, you like can't see.
I considered pulling over. There are some parts of it's you have now 5 seasons. I don't know how they're stretching into 5 seasons. I'm only in season 2, the second book. So it's well worth. It is the best escapism of all of this time. I do a walk for an hour. I do my first half hour is catching up on the news and all the stuff that's going on, and then the second half hour is My Dad Wrote a Porno. So there, I brought it up for a continuation in my podcast. Okay, so what are you watching? Both serious and brain candy. What are you watching?
We have started over. Well, I never really watched it, but my partner is starting over watching Seinfeld. It has aged not well in some ways, and in other ways is fine and still funny. But it feels like one of those shows that like I've lived in New York for like 8 years. How have I not seen this? So we've been watching that, and
that's a long commitment.
Yeah, you know, it's just kind of nice to have something that's like 20 minutes and just fit it in here and there when we need it. And we also just started Babylon Berlin this week, which has been good on Netflix. Okay. But
we haven't watched that. We just finished The Mandalorian yesterday. I've watched it before, but one of my children was finally like, fine, I'll watch it with you, and so we watched it and totally hooked. That was fun. Yeah, it's fascinating having, you know, a teenager and an early college student in the house to see what are the young people watching these days.
Yeah, what are they watching?
Trash. I just keep telling them, got the old one, like, what is this trash? And then I'll sit there and be, you know, like 4 episodes later, I'm like, oh my gosh, what's she gonna do?
It's so true.
It is, yeah. And they're remaking all of these, like Party of 5 got remade. All of these shows are getting remade that they're watching now. So it's fast. It is interesting. Yeah, there's a couple of them that I'm just like, this is so awful. East High, what is it? Just one of them. It's just, I can't do it. But yeah, so we're doing that. We do a lot of movies as well. Are you all movie people? I'm
like notorious for falling asleep during movies. So we don't watch them that often, but we did this weekend. I had never seen this. This has been like Emily rewatching all the classics she never saw. And so we watched The Godfather Part 1 and 2 this weekend, which was a lot.
I've never seen them.
It was especially the first one was just so New Yorky. I think also we're having this like missing the city that we live in that's outside, you know, that we're in but not experiencing. So we've been watching all of this like New York kind of stuff. Like, remember when we used to go to restaurants?
Go to there. Back in the day.
That's right.
Well, that's the funniest part is like back in the day, I'm like, I think it was like a month ago, right?
Yes.
Like it's forever. It feels really long. But yeah, okay, cool. Any other news, like pop culture-y things that you're doing, listening to, reading that are of interest?
Not totally. You know, I think this is the one in me that's like everything I do must have a purpose. So, but I did just recently start playing this tiles game on the New York Times app, and it's taking up a lot of my time. So
yeah, I do letterpress, which is so fun. Yeah, that's interesting. After a first couple of weeks of this, I just gave up on trying to be productive and realized that I'm like, I'm doing so much more work than I did before. Like, what is going on? And talked with our session, our leading, our kind of our board, and it's like, so what do you think we really need? Like, what do people want as opposed to what do we think they want? And so we kind of realized that they don't not everybody needs everything that I thought that I should be doing, which was a great relief. The one thing that I've discovered is that the afternoon nap, I used to have to sneak them in, but now they're just easier to take.
They're just there. They're
They're
waiting
just
for you.
there. They are 3:00. Every like dad's going for his nap. I'm like the old man. I am that guy. If I had a recliner in the living room that would just lean back, that would be me. I would just be all over that. Yeah. So
yeah, I mean, I think, one of the things that I remembered at the beginning of this was I find myself sleeping a lot more. And I was remembering that when I first I was in Guatemala for a year with a volunteer program. And I was like learning Spanish, and I had to sleep like 12 hours a night. And I thought I was depressed at first, but it was just my brain trying to take in so much new information and getting tired. And my brain needed the sleeping time to like process and repair itself.
Yeah. No, I think
and I'm finding that again.
Because I just remember early on, I couldn't sleep. Like head was continually churning, worrying as a pastor, but also just everything happening. And now I think you're right. That's a great thing. It's like, now I think we're just catching up on and trying to find what's the normal pattern going to be and try to adapt to it. So, well, I appreciate you joining me today. I'm glad we could finally do this. For those of you that are listening, this is also going to be posted on YouTube. I haven't done the raw shots on YouTube, but we'll post this one along with one that I did with Laura, so you all will see that one as well there. Again, all the links to connect with Emily and Presbyterian Peace Fellowship will be in the show notes, and we'll see you next week. Thanks for joining me, Emily.
Thanks, Bruce. Bye.